Welcome Prac-Es to the second episode of Ask Prac-E Anything. We've just gotten out of the literacy and numeracy test, which is compulsory now for all education students. Just before we get into the questions, I just want to let you know how it actually went. Surprisingly though, I'm studying English, going to be an English teacher, and I found the maths section a lot easier. Make of that what you will. With maths, it's a lot of just being able to read graphs, ratio, area, bit of percentage, stuff like that. So it wasn't that bad. You just basically have to be able to read a graph and be able to say what it says. Not too difficult. With English though, I actually found it really difficult because it shot me back to NAPLAN testing, where they give you a massive story and they say, how does the character feel about this? But then they'll give you 5 synonyms. So I found that quite subjective with what actually they wanted with that. So I don't really know. Should have passed with both, but we'll see. So it's not as bad as what I was thinking it was going to be. So if you're worrying about the literacy and numeracy test, don't worry, it's fine. But with that being said, let's get on to question 1 of Ask Prac-E Anything.
What things should I focus on day 1 of Prac?
So we're talking about day 1, we actually get into the staff room, we actually get into school, what you actually should do. I think a lot of the time, one massive mistake that Prac students do is doing too much. A lot of the times you want to be best mates with the staff straight away, you want to be best mates with the students straight away, but a lot of the time you seem too pushy when you go too eager. So it's like with military training, you want to be the grey man. You want to be in there doing all right, but you don't want to be going too low, you don't want to be going too high, you just want to be there. So with the first week, I'd actually say, don't do anything. As stupid as that sounds, don't try too hard to be everyone's best mate day 1. And don't try to get too in with the students, don't get too in with the staff. Because you're not really expected to do anything your first few days. Spend those first few days just getting acclimatized to the situation, getting acclimatized to the atmosphere, how the staff work, how the classes work, the feelings of the school, how they see their students, the amount of pressure and work they expect you to do. So for the first few lessons, I know it's observation days, technically, but I would really say observe on those observation days, as silly as that sounds. So get accustomed and don't try too hard.
What are some important questions that I need to ask my teacher on day 1 of Prac?
Some good questions to ask your teacher is basically anything that will help you when you're teaching the class. So you need to know who you are going to be teaching. So a good question to ask is things that they have trialed and errored with to get in with that class up until that point, because obviously they would have dealt with those students a lot longer than you would have. So they probably, you may have an idea on how to work with that class, but then who knows, maybe they tried the exact same thing in term 1 and it didn't work. So good things to ask those teachers is how they've gotten that class up until that point, because usually they've gotten pretty cozy when you go out on Prac, which is usually term 3, 4. So they've probably gotten up until that point. So if the students are working really well, you need to ask them how they got to that point and what works well. Because you may come up with this amazing idea and your teacher would have done the same activity in term 1 and it failed miserably. So you need to know why that is. Maybe there's some students with learning difficulties, behaviour problems, maybe some students don't work well together, maybe some students don't learn effectively with one learning style over the other. So the number 1 major thing that I would ask is everything to do with the students and the classroom dynamic, because where the toilets are, what your schedule's going to be, those things will just get handed to you. You want to go that step deeper and figure out things that will actually help you when you go out into the classroom. If your class is going nutsoid, knowing where the toilets are and when assembly isn't going to help you at that stage.
What are some of your teacher tips and tricks that I can use on my first day on Prac?
Some tips or tricks that I really would like to have known before going out is just the little things that you may forget here or there, like having folders for each of your class. That's a given. Being able to have adequate resources like whiteboard markers, because the whiteboard markers, they always have a running out of ink and look crap. You always look more professional if you have those really thick ones that are like that. So obviously bring all the resources. One little tip that I can give you is get a class list with the pictures of the kids on day one. On my third prac, I didn't get around to getting that. And then halfway through my prac, I still didn't know 1 or 2 kids' names. And it's a lot more effective when those kids are acting up in your class, to be able to call them by name, to be able to go, "Oi, Timmy, stop it," rather than, "Oi, that boy in the corner," because they kind of disassociate from you when they do that. But if you know their name from the get-go, one, it kind of gets them in line if they know, because you're able to call on them specifically. And also it gets you in with them a bit, because they feel like you've gone above and beyond with the effort to get to know their name. So that would be number one, get a class name with the pictures of the kids, and then learn them, because it's so much easier to know faces than trying to know names and then pair them with the kids when you actually see them physically. And then day one, when you're observing, you don't have to do anything in particular. Sit at the back of the class with the lists and try and find the kids, because sometimes they look different to the picture. Try and find them specifically and go, Tim, Johnny, and try and link them. So when you actually do start teaching them, you're able to split them up, call on them specifically. So that's one little tip that I can give you specifically, is try and learn the kids as soon as possible, their names as soon as possible. And one thing that can really help with that is getting a class list with their pictures. That is the second episode of Ask Prac-E Anything. My name's been Liam D. Auliciems. Question for you, the viewer. Question for you, the viewer. What's one little tip that you use to remember people's names when you first have to know a whole lot of people's names all at once? What's the little tip or trick that you use? Thank you very much for watching. I'll see you next week.